If your baby clearly wants to eat, but feeding makes things worse, that's usually not a feeding failure. It's a coordination problem. This is the baby who latches, pulls off, cries, tries again, and the feed just keeps falling apart. You might assume something is wrong with the milk, the flow, the latch, reflux, something. And it's so confusing because babies can look hungry and still be unable to feed calmly. Once you understand why, the behavior stops feeling random and starts feeling more like a pattern that you can untangle. One of the strongest clues parents notice, often without realizing it, is variability. Some feeds go beautifully, others fall apart, often later in the day. Same baby, same milk, different result. If the problem were primarily the milk itself, the feeding would be consistently hard. When feeding quality changes with time of day or state, that points us towards regulation and nervous system load, not the milk alone. You might be asking, but isn't feeding supposed to be comforting? This is where a lot of us get stuck. It's a really reasonable question because yes, feeding is supposed to be comforting. Sucking activates calming pathways in the nervous system. It slows the heart rate. Swallowing helps organize breathing, and close contact adds pressure, rhythm, and co-regulation. That's why feeding works so well to settle babies much of the time, and why it's so confusing when a feed seems to make things worse. The missing piece is this: feeding regulates a baby when and only when the nervous system can organize around it. Feeding depends on coordination, as I've said. For a baby to feed efficiently, sucking, swallowing, and breathing have to stay precisely timed. When that timing holds, feeding looks rhythmic and calm. When it breaks down, feeding quickly becomes chaotic. Under stress, fatigue, overstimulation, or escalating distress, the systems that support feeding start to compete. Breathing becomes less regular, muscle tone increases, and timing becomes less precise across these systems. So when a baby comes into a feed already highly activated, crying hard, tense, or overstimulated, the same act that usually calms can become too demanding. Not because food isn't needed, but because coordination isn't accessible yet. In those moments, feeding can escalate distress instead of resolving it. So you're probably here because your baby looks like she wants to eat, but keeps pulling away. She keeps trying to feed, but the system can't stay organized enough to do it. That doesn't mean she's not hungry. It just means coordination isn't accessible now. So I'm not trying to downplay the other types of feeding issues. Those are real. Flow differences exist. Reflux exists. Oral tension also exists. But behavior alone can't isolate which one you're dealing with because multiple biological systems can produce the same outward signs. That's why interpretation has to come before intervention. If feeding feels chaotic right now, pause before assuming something is wrong with your milk or your body. Look at the moment. Look at your baby's breathing, tension, rhythm, and state, not just the fact that they're upset. Think about how the day unfolded. New stimuli, unusual stress, cumulative fatigue, maybe a growth spurt. Or do they need something that makes feeding possible first? So how do you change your baby's state? I talk more about that in my video, The Real Reason Babies Cry Every Night, if you want to go deeper.